So let me just spend a little moment on Copenhagen. I don't, probably much of this is repetitive, but there is a big question whether Kyoto should go forward as a operating framework or whether it should be buried. And I would say the outcome from Copenhagen was unclear. But the United States, and this is true of the administration, but it's also deeply true of the Congress, they reject the Kyoto proposition, which is that you have one set of standards for the developed countries, that's us, and another set of standards for the developing countries, and that's China and India. Now, nobody cares about what Chad does or Bolivia, but they do care about what China and India and Brazil and Indonesia and a handful of other big emerging countries do. And the basic view, you can smooth it over however you want, but the basic view is we're not going to let those guys get away with no standards. And that was essentially the Kyoto. Voluntary for them, mandatory for us. So now at the end we didn't toss out Kyoto, but that's a live issue. The other very live issue is, can you really work through the kind of UNFCCC process, which is a lot of countries. Of course, they don't have all the same voice, but it's basically supposed to be a consensus process. And the reason we ended up with this 3-page accord is that you couldn't get consensus on a deeper binding treaty there. Those of you who follow the World Trade Organization know how difficult it is in that area, which I deal a lot in, and I'm sure many people here deal a lot in, to get consensus with a large group of countries. So there's a real question on the process going forward. We will see in Mexico City how this comes out, but I'm expecting that the process will be narrowed down to the G20, and that's exactly what is happening as we speak. There'll be a meeting, obviously in Canada, it will be a very important one, and then in Seoul on this. Now, the accord had these core elements of the Bali Action Plan, which I think are generally familiar to people. The only hard commitment is we're not supposed to have temperatures rise more than 2 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level. There is some commitment on money, but it's very fuzzy as you get out to 2020. There's $100 billion, how it's allocated between developed countries, how it's allocated between public-private, that's all uncertain. The next thing that must be heavily emphasized is the Environmental Protection Agency. This is President Obama's hammer, and I think as we've seen with the health bill, he's tenacious, he's dedicated, and I know climate is down on the agenda now, but I don't think President Obama is about to, toss in on this one. And he has the hammer of the Environmental Protection Agency, which, thanks to the Massachusetts versus EPA case back in 2009, the EPA can write all sorts of regulations, said the Supreme Court. First it does an endangerment finding, and then it starts writing the regs. And Lisa Jackson, the head of the EPA, has said, just over the weekend, that she's going to come out with regulations for large emitters in 2011, in the early 2011, and I think that probably means January, February, a year from now, and medium emitters by late 2011, and then small emitters 2016, so small guys don't worry. But large and medium-sized emitters, stationary sources, are going to get regulation. Now, these regulations by the EPA will have a couple of purposes. One is to carry out President Obama's goals. Secondly, to tell the Congress, basically, if you don't legislate, we will regulate.